Well, it's been one day of the retreat. By now, hopefully, you'll have some sense, some sense to some degree, however vaguely, of what's going on here. I know, the majority of you are yogis in various degrees of advancement. One interesting aspect of all of this is that there's virtually no progression. You're always at the starting point. When you do noticing, when you check out this, when you feel what is here, when you tune into this, energy whatsoever, you're always at exactly the same place. When you become an expert and you've been doing it for 20 years and you're a super genius spiritual yogi and you have all of these amazing chops and cities, it still is exactly what it is right now and exactly what it has always been. Remember, it doesn't actually develop. You can seem to develop various degrees of subtlety and artifice in terms of being able to sort of drop into it very rapidly, very accessibly, you might say. But in actuality, there's no actual progress. It's not like you have developed and now I'm in a different place and my yoga is a different thing, my noticing is a different thing. It's always essentially the same. So the first taste of noticing is the finish line. What this is, the mystery that this is the first thing you tap into if you're tapping into anything at all. And of course, you are tapping into it whether or not you're aware of noticing you're tapping into it, because there's nothing else to tap into. That's what we got. So that's one interesting aspect of this stuff. How's your day been? What's going on? What's this email? Any revelations, any befuddlements? Did you sign up for the wrong retreat?
I was surprised this morning when we sat down in meditation and you said, do this, and above all, do not meditate. Now I came to meditate, and then it changed everything around.
The point of all this, the essence of all this, is to notice what it is, what it already is, what it intrinsically is, what it can't not be. And so all sorts of pretending to meditate or pretending to structure yourself or pretending to hold yourself this way or hold yourself that way is just a contrivance, which if anything is going to distract you from the simple noticing of what this is, which is best accomplished in just drop everything, just do it. Here it is, what is it? And then it does the work. It's not like you need to construct some intermediary, construct some bridge to it. You just, okay, do your stuff. Okay, reality, show me what you got. Hit me with your best shot. And it always does, because that's all it ever does, because that's what this is. A big challenge in spirituality is it's easy to have the notion that you're supposed to do something, you're supposed to achieve something, you're supposed to purify something or master something or become something. But that's not what it's about at all. The power, the potency, the astounding quality of this is in what it is intrinsically. It already is that. So it's really just a matter of recognizing that, of noticing it. And since it already is that, and since it is right here and there's nothing else right here, it is possible to notice that. It's possible to recognize that. And of course, that's the point of all this.
Could you talk about dynamism and stillness? So it's just the same thing.
Sure. When you go looking for stillness, what do you find? You find this. When you go looking for dynamism, what do you find? You find this. Is it dynamism? Is it stillness? No. You can't say what it is. You can't say what you find when you look for it. And since you can't say what you find, how can you claim to have found dynamism or found stillness?
You can only claim those two things as textures that you notice.
You can claim it as that. But then once you notice the texture itself, the texture doesn't establish itself as actually being anything in particular. I mean, all of these experiments, all of these games of, look for dynamism, look for presence, look for texture, are tricks. They're jumping off points so that to get you to engage, to get you to look. And when you look, what you find will not accord with what you expected to find. It will not accord with what you're looking for. But that's the very nature of this. It is what it is. It's not what you think it is. And so the whole point is to look at it. And so all of these tricks to get yourself to look at it are valuable to the extent they do that. And the fact that you don't actually find what you're looking for, it turns out to be a good thing. Because if you already know what you were going to find, then the world is a much smaller place than it actually is.
It's very boring because you can't be surprised.
Yeah. The nature of what this is the essence of surprising. It's always surprising. It's never not surprising. It's impossible to get bored with reality. If you're bored with something, you're bored with something you imagine something to be. Because reality itself is entirely surprising, always. It's never predictable. It's never expected. It's never expectable. It's always a revelation of newness, of freshness, of uniqueness, of amazingness. If that gets boring for you, you've got really high standards.
So Michael sent me a video of some guy talking about non-duality. And he's talking about science. The pursuit of some science is to study the predictability of things, or at least in the process of scientific research on this. Is so convoluted what I'm saying right now. The idea is, we'll find out where an electron is going to be. Probably the idea of predicting behavior.
Right.
And we're getting to the point where we can do that. But experience is something that you can never predict. You can predict you're going to wake up tomorrow at 7 o'clock for your alarm ring, but what you will experience at that time is completely unpredictable.
Exactly so. And science turns out to be the same thing. Science pretends to try to create predictability. It pretends to try to create accurate models of the way things work. But these models always fail, which is why there's always a new theory. Relativity is great, but relativity fails, so quantum mechanics comes along. Quantum mechanics is great, but quantum mechanics fails, so string theory comes along, or whatever. Because there is no, I assert, and in fact I predict, that there will never be a final scientific model. There will never be a final scientific. So science will never get it right. Because it's not something that can be gotten right. It will always deviate from expectation. It will always deviate from prediction. I think it's intrinsically surprising.
Well, even if they did get it right, it's still just the math, right? It's not the actual thing.
Right, and the thing deviates from the map. The thing is other than the map. An accurate map would be the thing. You know, an accurate map of New York, a totally accurate map of New York would be New York. Because otherwise this grain of dust on this sidewalk isn't on the map. You know, so to get that grain of dust there, you have to have every grain of dust there, and all of a sudden you've got New York. But New York isn't what you expect, because New York is changing, New York is dynamic, New York is surprising. So the map itself is you know, the notion of a final map or a complete map is fallacious. I mean, this one principle is the essence of all this stuff. Experience always deviates from expectation. It will always deviate from your idea of it, your model of it. Always. Not most of the time, not a lot of the time. Always. You don't know what experience is going to look like in the next week. Period. You do not know that. You can't know that. You know, the more vaguely you approach it, you know, like you said, the more vaguely you describe it, the more accurate it is. In the next minute, I'm going to be seeing this room pretty much like I'm seeing it now. Okay, that's true. And yet it's so vague as to be absurd. But experience is made of specifics. Experience is not made of generalities. I see precisely what I see now as I'm seeing it. That's absolutely specific. I can't specify what the specific is, but it is what it is. But as soon as I try to specify it, I'm wrong, unless I get really vague in general, in which case it's right. You know, tomorrow the sun will rise. Yeah, okay. You know, but what's that going to look like? You know, there's no way to know. You know, if the sun is just about to rise, you still don't know what it's going to look like. You don't know what your experience is going to look like. And experience, the actuality of experience, is always precisely what it is. There's nothing vague about it. It's unresolvable, but it's not vague. It's precisely the way it is. Yeah, it's absolutely indescribable. But it's not vague, it's absolutely precise. You're experiencing exactly what you're experiencing now. The coexistence of absolute specificity and absolute unresolvability seems like a paradox. But if you look at experience, it's self-evident. Experience is made of specifics. Your experience is precisely what it is now. But when you look at that precision, it's a precision of vagueness. It's a precision of shades of gray. It's a precision of fuzziness. It's a precision, but it's precisely that, and the way that it is that in the instant.
So what would you say about someone's level of being present to what they're noticing as opposed to, let's say, just kind of being caught up in some kind of an identification? Maybe they're babbling on about something that happened to them. Are there degrees of noticing and being
No.
present? No.
There's nothing but noticing. Not noticing is noticing.
Okay, I need you to clear that.
Being caught up in confusion and identification and fantasy is exactly what it is at the time. Of course, what it actually is at the time is not describable by that description, but nothing is describable by any description. So, you know, clear noticing is not describable by those words. Being caught up in fantasy and identification is not describable by those words. And the two are exactly the same condition.
Wow.
Experience is always experience. It's never a better experience or worse experience. It's never a clearer experience or murkier experience. It's always just exactly as it is.
Even if the person is not even noticing it's,
There's no such thing.
I guess I'm really caught up in some other concept that I have been holding on.
You're not. There's no such thing as that.
Well, if somebody chuckle, maybe you can help me out.
What do you want to be helped out of?
So, okay, so there's this notion that I guess I've learned, so I thought it was true, that we can either be more present in noticing, or we can be caught up in whatever and have less awareness of this in the moment. So
That's a fantasy, and if that fantasy is present, it's present with absolute presence.
I didn't,
That's a fantasy, and if that fantasy is present, it's present with absolute presence and absolute clarity. And noticing that that's the case is good noticing.
So can you just maybe restate it in a way that
Can I make it make sense? No, it doesn't make any sense at all. It's completely irrational.
the notion that I like, or kind of,
Yeah, it doesn't exist. And seeing it doesn't exist is good noticing.
okay,
But it doesn't get negated, it doesn't cease to exist. It just doesn't exist. Because it isn't that. You can't get here from anywhere. You can't get here from somewhere. You can't get here from being caught up in a fantasy, because there's no such thing as being caught up in a fantasy. It's just this. The presence of experience. And noticing that that's the case is good noticing. And you're always noticing that because nothing else is ever the case. And noticing that you're noticing that is good noticing.
So noticing is always happening,
Yes.
but maybe noticing that you're noticing is not always happening. Is this what you're saying?
You could say that.
Well, I mean,
It's not possible. It's not this or that. It's paradox. It doesn't make sense. It's irrational. Noticing is not something you can do. Noticing is something you're always doing. And noticing that you're always doing it is good noticing. So don't worry about how to do it. Don't worry about not doing it. Just do it. Simply feel thank yourself. I mean, just notice the presence of experience. That's all.
I already was doing it.
Exactly. That's good noticing. And you can't say what it is, and yet the mind continually says what it is, sloppily, and self-aggrandizing. But that's what it does. So no surprise there.
so if noticing is nothing, not anything that you can do, but noticing occurs, it's always happening.
Noticing always happens, and noticing that that's the case is good noticing. Right, Stan?
Correct.
I give up.
And not noticing that that's not happening is irrelevant.
That's bad noticing.
No,
Because you're still doing it.
it's what noticing can look like. Noticing can look like not noticing. And noticing that that's the case is good noticing.
Another way of saying it, maybe, is that you can't shut the experience off.
Well put. And there's never anything present but experience full on.
It's also not behavioral.
Absolutely.
That's sort of so I can look however it looks
Yeah.
as an expression.
Yeah, it is not something you do. You don't do experience. Experience simply is. It's call it a miraculous presence or something.
Would you say believing in the description of experience is not good noticing?
Believing in the description of experience, noticing that happens is good noticing.
So let's say you're on a ship at sea.
There's no ships and there's no sea, but yeah. And noticing that that's the case.
I feel like there's some of this stuff to jump or something.
There's not, yeah.
I'm just thinking about how it's amazing that anybody can communicate anything to anyone.
It is, it's amazing, it's miraculous. But everything is miraculous, so it's in a way not surprising at all.
At the same time, who's to say that anyone's communicating anything to anyone?
Good point.
Maybe that's what it seems as if something's been communicated.
It does, doesn't it?
I came back after this morning, Harry said, well, where did we work today? I said, I have no idea.
Well, it's like I was talking about the last time we met. There's a third factor. There's the presence of experiencing, the presence of the apparent experienced, and there's a third factor, this mysterious meaningfulness, this mysterious correlation, intrinsic correlation of apparent information, apparent patterns that appear in profound interrelationship, apparent interrelationship with each other, which of course is what we mean by communication. That's what we mean by insight. It's what we mean by meaningfulness and all of that. And that this is present in the presence of this naked phenomena of experiencing is very interesting. And it's totally unanalyzable. You can't make any sense of it. You can observe that it is present in the way that it is. But the other two poles of experiencing potency and that which is experienced are likewise unanalyzable and unfinite, and yet self-evident, and essentially miraculous. How does experiencing happen? How is your experience being experienced right now? What's doing the experiencing? You look, if you're sincere and diligent, and you look and try and find that, you cannot answer that question. It cannot be answered. You can't find it. And yet it's self-evidently the case, apparently. Right? And likewise, you look for what's being experienced. What is object, what is light, what is thought, what is whatever. Again, the question is unanswerable. It's intrinsically and fundamentally unanswerable. And so, given those two naked aspects, what's meaningfulness? What's cross-correlation? What's information? What's relationship? Again, it's unanswerable, but it's self-evident.
Yeah, I mean, I wake up in the morning and then the light starts, whatever, however, I go from one state to another, and it's like I know what to do, but I can't really describe it.
Of course. And if you're looking for that knowing and try and pin it down, you can't even find it. It's self-evident that it's a knowing. It feels like a knowing, whatever that means. But then you go looking for it. What do I mean by that? What is feeling like a knowing? What is a knowing? What is knowing? And you go looking. But here it is. Nothing is negated, but nothing can be found. So it resolves into just debate. Essentially a miracle, essentially a question mark. It's a given. Reality is a given. You can't question it. I mean, you can question it, but good fucking luck. Maybe. Maybe in a way, not finding it is a most delicious kind of finding. I mean, the whole notion of finding is the most tormenting fantasy. The whole notion that there is a finding, that the word finding has any meaning whatsoever. Yeah. Seek and you will find. What bullshit. What a lie.
Finding sort of implies this the reached the end.
It implies that there's some resolution. You know, and one of the most explicit aspects, apparent aspects of this is its unresolvability, even though that can't actually be found. Unresolvability. Talking about unresolvability. You know, the notion of finding something implies the fantasy of resolvability. You can actually resolve something to a result, to a finality, to a resting place. And in experience, that is impossible. That never happens. It cannot happen. It does not happen. You can't find that it doesn't happen. Unresolvability itself is unresolvable, which is dizzying. And yet, it's self-evident.
Why is it the fact that nothing is resolvable, the finding of unresolvability? Why is unresolvability itself?
Because this is not a final condition. You can't arrive at unresolvability.
But you look at the bottomless pit and it's bottomless. It's abjectly bottomless.
Prove it.
Okay, you stand at the
Prove
bottom, you jump.
Look farther. It's still bottomless. Okay, look farther. It's still bottomless.
But at a certain point, can you go, you know what? There's no amount of time that the fun is going to give me a bottom. So
You can say that, but all of a sudden you're off and running into fantasy.
but it's like looking at the infinity of doors and going, one of these doors is going to have
Oh,
a thing that's going to stop.
it's exactly like that. It's exactly like that. And you can't prove that it isn't. But you're never going to find it. I mean, try it. I mean, hey, maybe you're the one that's going to resolve something. Maybe you're the guy, you're like the great savior in all of eternity that actually finds something.
It's more just the dizzying part of the bottom line being there is no bottom line.
Yeah, it is.
And I know you can't check that box because there are no boxes to check, but at a certain level, yeah, it's abjectly bottomless. It's unresolvable. There's no back wall to this.
Well, yeah, it becomes.
I can check that box.
Well, as a flavor, it's palpable.
Right.
Even though that it is a flavor that is palpable, cannot be resolved. Nonetheless, it's self-evident as a flavor is palpable. The quality of this, I mean, in the meditation this morning, I keep saying, feel what this is. Feel this and discover what it is by feeling. Because the quality of it, the palpability of its nature, is obvious and self-evident. But it's not an obviousness that you can then, have a bottom line and say, okay, now I've got it. Yeah, it's obvious. It is obvious, but then you can't demonstrate it. You can't find the obviousness.
Right.
You can't prove the obviousness. But you can know it by participating in it. And that's why I think of this as being a yoga as rather than a result. A yoga is an ongoing dance, an ongoing engagement. And the engagement is not final, but it is as final as it gets because there's nothing but.
So the quote from the Gospel of Thomas, seek and you shall find, would it feel more in the direction if it was seek and you shall know? And that knowing isn't, as maybe conceptually quantifiable as finding? Or implies less?
You're trying to be too precise with it. What you find is this. And in finding this, you discover that this is unfindable. But it's also unlosable.
So I
It
was
doesn't
thinking,
go away.
I'm thinking about that quote.
Yeah, but
How-
you're
how
being
would
too
you-
specific about the words. That's not the point of it.
Okay.
The quote is a means to an end, and the end is yes, find, seek, and you will find. Yes, here it is. Okay, what have you found? Did you find anything?
No.
So that way of putting it is a trick. It's magic. It's a magic trick. It's like, see, there's a rabbit in the hat. There's no hat, rabbit, no hat.
I'm thinking that for me, letting go of this idea that things can be resolved, which resolving all of that. I think that's one of the hardest parts.
Well, it is. That's at the core of delusion. That anything actually is anything is the root principle of delusion. That there is anything whatsoever.
No. It's a break up.
But you can't actually find anything.
I know.
In fact, as a good rule of thumb, or a good working algorithm for the yoga is anything that seems to be anything is a target for noticing. And in any sense whatsoever, anything that seems to be any particular way, no matter how generally, no matter to any degree whatsoever, it's like, okay, check that out, because it isn't. And ultimately, you're in a vagueness where nothing seems to be anything, which is not the end of seemings. Seemings are continually arising, but it becomes a continual dance of a disappearing mirage.
Like everything's on.
Stan, you had something?
No, because there is that tendency to go on. Why I want to get it. I want to understand what you're saying. But it's more like I love that one the phrase that gets us to that boost about entering the stream. It's not getting to the other shore. It's just entering the stream and streaming. I mean, it's like literally online or streaming.
Yeah.
Which is more has a journey quality to it. Things that just things are mundanely or not revealing. It's revealing all the time, totally, and that's how.
Well, it can't be said, so it ultimately is irrelevant.
Well, I mean, it's like because revealing things like it reveals itself as something, but what it reveals the streaming.
Which is an endless revealing, an implication of something that has never arrived at. And yet here it is. It's like always. It's just nothing is lost, nothing is excluded, nothing is negated. Yeah. Here it all is. But is it a here, and is it a it all, and is it an is? And yet here it all is. As much as it ever was.
And that's the machine tilts because it can't.
Yeah.
The paradoxes pile up too high. So how can this absolute vagueness be this absolutely specific?
It's impossible. Absolutely, this is impossible. And yes, here it is.
Is it like Elmer Fudd trying to stalk the rabbit, and it's actually the rabbit that's stalking me? That's a sort of surprise at the end, or whatever. The end that's not there.
Sure, maybe. Check it out. That's a good jumping off point. Any jumping off point is a good jumping off point, but the main thing about jumping off points is to jump off them, not to set up housekeeping. And it's all hogwash because there's no jumping off, there's no points, it's just, just who you are like usual. It's not any different than before you arrived at the retreat. It's not any different than this, it's not any different than whatever it is.
When you say like you have to kind of objectify it to come up with any of those things, then that kind of creates the time.
Exactly. Sure. You have to pretend that you can make sense of it to make sense of it. To think that you make sense of it. But it's all bravado. I mean, look at it this way. When you were, 1 week old, what did you think this was? And you actually haven't gained one iota in your savvy of understanding what this is. You just become a much better bullshit. Maybe. You don't know anything more than you do when you were 1 week old. What do you know when you're 1 week old? No, exactly the same. This is that. It's arrogance, it's pretense, the famous quote was that Solomon's vanity, vanity, all is vanity. There's arrogance and pretense of having a clue or knowing something or being a good bullshit or, I know who I am, I know what I'm doing, I know where I am. Yeah, right.
Seems like there's nothing you can say or do that changes anything.
Maybe, but not, who knows? You can't know that, Doing isn't negated, but what doing is, and whether or not it changes anything, and what change means, and for that matter, what anything means, is up for grabs, question marks. But it's not negated. There's no participation is not negated, effort is not negated, ambition is not negated. But they become interesting questions.
There's a certain amount of sort of feeling of futility about that. There's also, it's very free.
Yeah, it's no more futile than it ever was.
We just didn't know it.
Maybe we should just put that song on.
Same as another one.
But there is a sort of assumption that I can't do.
Is there?
Well, like when you're talking about the jumping off point, you need to jump off. You need to start noticing by noticing. Just do it.
Sure.
Right? But there is, it seems like there's a sort of block, like I just assume, I just take for granted that I can't do it, or part of the assumption is like, I feel like I need someone to do it for me, like I need you to push me off the edge.
Is that a necessary assumption? Is that true? I mean, you know, it may be true that it seems to be that way, but is it really that way? I mean, you do what you do. You know, you're not here because I made you come here. You're here because you came here. So that's a jumping off that you do.
It seems like an easy thing to do.
No, maybe jumping off is easy. Who knows? I mean, even calling it jumping off is, you know, legal. Jumping off of what? What's the jumping? What's the off? You know, it's more manipulation and bullshit. That's the jump off.
That's part of my assumptions dissolve.
But they intrinsically dissolve because they're just assumptions. They only are maintained as long as you maintain them. Which is a lot of work. If you don't assume your assumptions, no one's going to do it for you.
Very bad scientific experiment. Well, I guess that actually is how science is done, but it's done badly with like where you come up with a bunch of assumptions and then you go from there. That's generally what they do in experiments.
So, I wear glasses. They don't wear them. That's, but when I wear them, my brain's happy because you can see what's going on. It has a clear idea. Yeah, now I get it. There's Peter, there's the lines behind him, there's the thing on top. We got this, we're done. You know, I take them off and everything's more available.
You notice I take my glasses off.
I haven't noticed that, in fact.
You didn't have your glasses on, so how can you see I take my glasses off?
This need to, this constant kind of wanting to settle it.
Sure.
You know, mind is so happy when things it's done that you never really always gets upset.
Yeah. Well, it's a joy of engagement. It's the thrill of the hunt, the thrill of the chase. You know, it's like, ah, yes, another day.
So that offers a new perspective for me. So you're talking about settling it, and what I'm realizing what's going on here is this increasing, this, you know, increased noticing, increased awareness, so it's yeah, it's about settling it or having more, just this notion that's. And I've been believing in that.
Well, whatever the present conditions are, you relate to them and then structure your ambition or your strivings around that. And then it changes to the next instant, which is totally unpredictable. And then where are you? You basically start all over again. And you may pretend that it's an ongoing thing, but in actuality, the sand is continually dropping out from under you.
Well, it's just really mind-blowing that I'm now seeing this as a framework. I mean, like seeing it as a framework as opposed to something that I thought was real.
Cool. The whole point of this is to question experience, not to find the answer. point of it is to question. The point of it is, well, here's your experience. What is it? Well, I always thought it was X, Y, Z. Okay, check it out. Question it. Look at it. You know, when you're naive, you may have the fantasy that you're actually going to get the answer. Now I know what it is. Oh, thank goodness. Now I can check that off my list and move on to getting rich and conquering the world or whatever. But questioning experience is what experiences do. So when you discover that, you're in the stream. You know? This is really curious. This is really interesting. That's what experiences say. Every morning you wake up and it's like, wonder what's happening. Wonder what's going to happen. Wonder what it is.
So,
The voice in your head is it, but it's not. It's like what it seems to be.
And that's there too. There's no more befuddling than it ever was. I mean, you know, here we are hanging out. Big thrill. Big news.
I was saying yesterday that it's like it's like being. I feel like I'm becoming more like my dog. You know, you wake up, it's like, you know, it's like wow. You know, it's like he's just you know. Well, it's very good. That's just exuberance, or you know, there's an exuberance about the whole thing.
Sure. Yeah. It's totally new. Sure. Experience is exciting. It's interesting. It's, you know, it's a continual surprise. It's a continual challenge. It's a continual invitation to you know, to explore it, to play with it.
Yeah, and the tendency is not okay. It's a spiritual thing. The whole is being that way.
Yeah.
That's what's
Well, developing sophistication, developing, you know, moving beyond the naive simplicity, you know, a naive, overly simplistic way of looking at things. One discovers that. One discovers, you know, that these ideas of spirituality and achieving and purification and liberation and all that are child's fantasies. You know, they're like you know, pictures of rainbows and flowers and little duckies. It's like, well, it looks cute, but you know, get real. You know, and learning to dance with ambiguity, learning to dance with unresolvability, learning to dance with the ongoing, you know, questions and fascination and inspiration and whatever weird things come up, you know, whatever weird motivations or perversions or, you know, ways of looking at things seem to present themselves. It's like, okay, that's in the mix. Then you just, you know, dance with it. I mean, this is life. It's what it always has been.
This morning we were talking about how how you have a dream and then all of a sudden there's this backstory that you're somehow you understand, and then we talk about that's happening to us, and you know, of course, as my memory's going, I don't really remember. But and before I thought, well, what's happening is just an interpretation. This notion that it's all just a backstory, it's like coming up from novo from the experience is kind of I don't know.
Well, where's your past? Where's your history? Where's the entirety of your life up to this present moment? Where is it? It's in your memory,
Right.
which is basically a readout of fantasy.
Right.
You know, your memory and your history as you remember it is not what happened.
Yeah.
Your memory is not your past. Your memory is not your life. It's a cartoon caricature version of it that you create revisionistically in real time.
That I got, but there's like this little thing of like, maybe there's just like something that's just like kind of being created as you go along.
Yeah, maybe there is.
Revisionistic thing, it's just like,
Maybe it is. Who knows?
and then sometimes people say, can you remember blah, 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 and I'm like, I don't have any recall of it. And maybe somebody who I was like good friends with at the time. It's kind of,
Sure.
kind of be scared of that.
It's just a matter, it's a reality check. See what it really is. What is your backstory? What is your history? What is your past? It's a real-time fantasy. And it's not necessarily a stupid fantasy. It's not necessarily wholly devoid of content and relevance. But it's not necessarily not either. You don't know what it is. It's an interesting question. But you know, as far as is discoverable, you can't actually visit the past. You can't relive a moment that you think of yourself as having lived. And so the whole relationship between memory and the concept of a past and actuality is interesting. It's slippery. It's strange. You know, and you know, we may be used to having a simplistic notion. No, the past really happened, and it's really there solidly. And my memory is maybe a little sloppy, but more or less correlates to what actually happened. And it's also somehow out there objectively. The past is there, it's sitting there somewhere. And even though I can't go there, it's still there, sitting there. It's like, where? Sitting where? I mean, is the present even sitting? You know, it's all of these things that are easy to think of naively, easy to think of simplistically, when you look at them, become slippery, become interesting.
And the reason you can't relive that moment as keenly as you believe you experienced it is because it's not happening now. And it's
I don't
fine.
know, but it's not a reason. I've never been able to. Maybe you can. Can you relive your third birthday?
I had one.
There you go.
Let's not talk about that.
Can you relive what?
Your third birthday.
I was probably not potty trained.
But it's easy to have simple ideas about things like time and the past and the future, you know, and the objective world and all that, and just sort of very simple notions and just assume that they're true. And which is fine, and that's doable, and maybe even the majority of people may be doing that, who knows. But it's not particularly interesting compared to actually looking at it, because what it actually is discoverable as being is much more interesting and multidimensional and dynamic and curious than these simple, static, you know, definable notions. Unresolvability is interesting as hell. It's very, very interesting. But it demands a certain maturity, a certain sophistication. You know,
Maybe it's relaxation.
well, it's just sitting in the same thing.
It's kind of a lack of purpose, lack of need.
Sure.
Is
Well, it's comfort with ambiguity. You know, you're comfortable with not having a simple knee-jerk solution, an answer. No, things are this way. Things are black and white. They're this way or they're that way. And that's what it is, and I know what it is, and that feels good. Okay, cool. You know, if that's what works for you, then hey, have at it, why not? But the multidimensional, slippery, unresolvable aspect of the way things actually are, if you can stomach it, is more interesting. You know, it's more, it has more dimension, it has more flavor. It's like, you know, an immature child, you know, they like sugar, they want sweet, and they want, you know, butter on toast, whatever, right? It's a simple thing. You give them a curry and they're like, ah! They can't handle it. They don't want the complexity, they don't want the ambiguity, they want. So we're good, don't let my peas touch my noodles. Separate parts of the plate. But then when you develop it, as maturity develops, there comes a certain ability to be with ambiguity, to be with complexity, to be with, you know, shades of gray, which is rich, which is interesting, which is, you know, juicy.
All that's word.
And a whole lot less work. Because if you do a reality check, shades of gray is kind of what we got.
It seems strange to me that, you know, like, just from remembering, you know, pre-verbal methods, and then raising, you know, having my kid, seeing how kids are pre-verbal. They're born into unresolvable. It's just total, and it's not even grabbing to make sense. It's just that it's all kind of falling to like, you know, goose to a half to a goose. And it seems that we start out that way. It's like 100% that way. And then how come we're talking about it? I mean, how come we have to kind of, you know, get used to it again? It's weird.
I feel you, isn't it?
Yeah. We have to go to the hospital to learn how to have a child. It's just so hard. I'm specifically big part of that. My parents obviously didn't do that.
But yeah, I mean, you know, there's the famous supposed quote from Christ, unless you become like a little child, you can't enter the kingdom of heaven. And this indicates exactly this principle that, you know, an honesty that you don't have a clue about what anything is, and yet you're engaged with all of it, which is never, and nothing other than that has ever been the case. And we become expert at denying that and pretending we have a clue, pretending we know who we are, pretending we know what we're doing, pretending we have all this competence. And it's all bravado, you know, and it's a lot of work. And we trip over our own lies, and we trip over our own stories, and which is even more work. And then, so, you know, you're basically struggling with our invention of maintaining and defending our ongoing invention of ourselves that we know is total bullshit. That we know it's not true.
It's not that, it's just experience hasn't gotten the message.
hasn't got the message. Take direction.
Keep up with me. There's this notion earlier on that it's unshareable. We talk about sociability and sharing. the sense of translatable.
Right.
And in a sense, it is.
Well, in a sense it isn't, but who knows? You can't prove it. It's like, it's easy to have a simplistic notion that communication is impossible, right? You're in your world, I'm in my world, I mean what I think I mean by what I say. You hear what you think I mean by what I say, which is not me because we have different experience, which proves that we can't communicate, but that's overly simplistic. Who says we can't? Maybe we can't communicate. Maybe it is communicable, maybe it is shareable.
It has to be total.
Maybe just, well, perhaps, maybe yes, maybe no, you know, but maybe there's a resonance, you know. I mean, because you can't, things are mysterious, things are weird, you can't put down definitively that things are this way or they're not. It can't be done. So, you know, yeah, maybe communication is impossible, but maybe not. Who knows, you know. Things are slippery, things are unresolved. And, you know, thinking you've got a handle on what's possible and what isn't, it's just more arrogance. It's more, you know, pretending to resolve things. Now I know what it is. Now I know how it works. And maybe, but maybe not.
Thinking that we know what's going on with the impulse for security and stability in a deep knowledge already that nothing is stable and nothing is secure. And that fear drives the sense of wanting stability and wanting to know what's going on.
Yeah.
And communication is also a very multivalent thing. It's not just words. There's body language, subtle movement, there's, you know, everything else that's in the environment is a part of communication.
Who knows? Subtle energy resonances, psychic vibes.
It's like saying, you could say that the only thing happening is communication.
The only thing happening is what?
It is communication. It's the soul fact is.
Right.
It's very peculiar that the conscious mind erects this notion that having a clue about things is security granting, and not having a clue about things implies insecurity, because the actual condition is exactly the opposite. The true security is your embeddment in reality, which is entirely mysterious, and you can't possibly have a clue about it. And
Would you repeat that?
the true security is the fact that you are one with reality. Reality is doing you. Reality is supporting you, which is entirely irrational and mysterious. There's no way you can make sense of that or think that you're defining it. So the conscious mind, the urgency of the persona, the psychological security of a strong persona, you know, knowing who you are and having integrity and being, you know, functioning or whatever. All of that, the notion that defensiveness is actually achieving something valuable is a complete fallacy. In actuality, exactly the opposite, which is the spiritual argument. You know, discover that reality is doing you and reality is you is the ultimate security. You know, so suppose I'm you know, I'm Peter Brown and I'm functional and I'm capable and I'm really trying my best and I'm trying to live a good life and blah 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 blah. But what do I do on my deathbed? Where am I then? What's going to happen then? What's got me then? You know, the shit's hitting the fan. My functionality is down the tubes at that point. So what's got me then? But what's got me then is what's actually got me now, which is I'm not doing myself. I happen to be here. I didn't put myself here. I didn't put Peter Brown here. I didn't put this body here. Reality extruded it mysteriously, apparently, or whatever, right? So it's reality doing it. So reality's got me. Reality's, you know, I'm embedded in reality. I'm an artifact of reality. And when I die, it will be reality doing that. So it's not a change of scenario whatsoever. Which is the true security. But it's not a rational security. It's not a security that you can defend whether you need to.
Well, security that has no fear.
Exactly. There's no fear because there's nothing to lose. There's nothing to defend. The reality defends itself. Take it up with management.
When my folks, when I watched them the last years, they're passing away and stuff. There was I haven't seen that many people die. I haven't seen. It wasn't manageable. I mean, it was chaos, really. And,
How can you control that?
yeah.
You're not doing it. But and which brings up the question: have you ever been doing anything? I mean, that is it gets more and more obvious as things fall apart. Maybe. But has it ever been different?
You know, I was just thinking that exercises I find useful in really getting the whole grip on the fact that reality is very spontaneous, is to sort of focus on how thoughts appear and noticing that you don't know what your next thought is going to be, and how spontaneous that actually is, and where it comes from. To try and find where it's appearing from. And pretty soon you start seeing that everything, including where your hand goes, nowhere. It's very tricky, but it's really an exercise in becoming comfortable with the not instability, but the transitional aspect of being itself, and how everything is spontaneously new in every instant and disappears in every instance. It's just as you can practice or notice seeing where they're coming from, you also can see where it all dissipates to, it disappears to. And then you begin to see that it's the same place.
All experiences, has the same dynamism. Here it is. What's putting it here? Where's it going? What's it made of? It's just, it's an apparent apparition.
It's a very useful exercise to me because you become very comfortable with not knowing, and you become also very trusting in that you don't need to know.
Sure. Because all functionality is that.
It's the
You
highest
can be very, very functional. You can be driving superlatively, carrying on a really, high level conversation and doing open heart surgery all at the same time. But, open heart surgery while you're driving is probably not recommended. But
I've done
But and where's all that coming from? When that's happening, how's it happening? It's just all functionality mysteriously appears. All dysfunctionality mysteriously appears.
So if there's a diligence in exploring what you think is the case, eventually there's an arrival at I actually nothing is the case.
Yeah, sure.
And anything I think is the case
Right?
is, of course, not the case.
Right. And even if there's an arrival, is not the case.
Right.
But yeah, absolutely. I mean, in a certain sense, all of this stuff is deconstructed. You know, you already have the punchline. It's just a matter of getting rid of the joke.
But I feel, you know, this thing constantly wants to own
Yeah. It's
it, or to describe it. Or
sure.
I got this. The Michael joke about that.
And it's not a matter of short-circuiting matter, denying it, or causing it to cease. It's just a matter of seeing that happens, that's this too, and what's up with that? You know, boy, my mind is an arrogant asshole. Isn't that interesting? What's new?
And is it?
Yeah, sure, exactly.
Seeing how it's funny too that you can actually have this sort of in your head at the same time. Like you can notice what an arrogant asshole your head is, but behaviorally it just be like the most kind, you know what I mean? Like it's not congruent. It doesn't match up.
Well, nothing is congruent, you know, when you're looking at it, nothing is coherent, nothing fits together elegantly. It's all this bizarre, you know, random shotgun splatter of just inconceivable qualities and energies that just don't make any sense with each other whatsoever, and yet,
As a function, apparently.
yeah, to whatever extent it is.
Yeah, whatever that means.
Well, I think I don't agree with the way you put that. I'm sorry. See, I think that we if you define coherence as the human idea of coherence, then sure, it's incoherent. But I think my experience is that it's all absolutely perfectly well fitted together, and it's coherent, and it's self-congruent.
Sure. That's another way of saying the same thing.
Whatever.
Well, no, it is.
No, I understand.
No, absolutely, we can put it that way. There's no accurate way to put things.
Right.
And however you put them, however artfully you put them, you can put them equally artfully from exactly the opposite perspective.
Or falls into both. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Because no way of describing it is accurate. So all of these artful descriptions are just that, they're artifice. They're elegant and beautiful, but they're magic tricks. Maybe not so elegant and beautiful a lot of the time. So what? Who gives a shit?
So
Henry does.
And Nancy's trying to.
It's the diet. So,
I think it's the glasses.
so as time goes by, I guess. The less armor, I guess I'll call it, the less thought I put into, or the less configuring, which seemed to be the case before, when I was a teenager. You gain this stuff that gets you through the world, kind of, and then it's got to come off. It just has to come off, or whatever. That's the concept. And so the more vulnerable one, more vulnerable suddenly the more I get punched sometimes by my own kind of grappling with this thing. I realize, oh my God, you're holding onto these bars like crazy for 2 weeks. You're nuts. You're nuts with your sense of doomsday now. And you've just been, oh, this is all the thing and nothing. You're like, and I'm astonished. I call my force, like, Michael, I'm in it. I got the thing. It's got me. It's like, yeah. And then it eases up and you go, what the hell is he doing? So it seems.
But you never solve any of that stuff. It's not like it's like, okay, now I've taken care of that. Thank you. It's like, no, you just see it.
Yeah.
Nothing changes. You know, you're still a crazy jerk.
Yeah.
I'm speaking for myself.
Yeah. I appreciate the nothing personal. I appreciate the
Personally for you,
You know, but there's in that seeing, it's interesting. It doesn't change it. You don't even solve it. It's not like you're not, you know, a perverse, obsessed idiot. I'm speaking for myself.
There's this notion that traveling later will happen now constantly. There will be a constant later traveling.
And yet, paradoxically, it kind of is.
Yeah.
But it kind of isn't.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make any sense. And so, who gives a shit?
Yeah.
I mean, all of this, I mean, you know, I mean, we're sort of using the paradigm of spirituality here, but just maturing, you know, it's all smoke and mirrors. Maturing doesn't actually happen, but it happens. You know, I'm still the immature idiot I always was, and yet I'm maturing. You know, which is a kind of a being with the immature idiot in a way that is easy, but it's not any easier. I mean, the whole thing is that you can't. It's smoke and mirrors. But there you go. That's what we got. The work is what we got. I mean, spirituality, the whole paradigm of spirituality is absurd. It's creating a special case out of what is always the case, which is just a spontaneous fact of maturation of life forms over time. I mean, remember in my sheet I said, the yoga is the intrinsic process of reality itself. That's what this is. Life forms by their very existence mature, whatever that means. And that's what we got. That's and spirituality is just looking at that from within a certain sort of absolute or extreme paradigm, or just a psychotic paradigm, whatever you want.
There's no notion of achievement.
Sure. Notion of development, notion of progress, I mean, all these kinds of things. Sure. I don't know. Everything changes and nothing changes.
There's something that you said this morning in meditation. You referred to that which does not change.
Well, it's all very paradoxical. You can look at it, it doesn't change, it's always exactly this experience is this experience. It hasn't become more or less experience. So in a sense, that's absolutely unchanging. And yet everything changes. Is there no development? Is there no change? Is there no maturing? Is there no, learning? Is there no, I mean, all of these things have some kind of relevance or some kind of implication and meaningfulness. I mean, even if you can't pin down exactly what they are and how they work, they aren't simply negated by unchanging let's cancel it all out. Let's just define all that as absolute zero. I mean, you can do that, but it's interesting. I mean, spirituality is always a paradox because the condition that you are moving to discover and moving to move into is the condition you always have been. I mean, what could be more paradoxical? And yet, is spiritual development actual? Absolutely. In the way that it is. And what way is that? Well, you can't say. It's not invalidated just because it's weird. Because it makes absolutely no sense, and it is, it can't even be found. It's not a simple nothing.
But development implies the word of becoming something. So,
Well, in a simple sense of mind, if you take it literally, if you say development is a notion which indicates some actuality which completely and utterly transcends that notion, and yet that notion is an indication of what that is, if not a comprehensive definition of what that is. I say again, so what? Here we are having
maybe tomorrow we'll just talk about Chinese dogs.
I don't know.
Chinese dogs.
No, I don't think so.
Chinese dog retreat is in the next one. Two blocks over that.
Oh, I know.
Well, Stan will be with you.
I might go to that one too. Where do you go from here? Where's the place to go?
So anyway, it's been fun hanging out with you this evening. And I hope you sleep real well, or whatever. And I hope I sleep real well, man. You can take care of yourself. Yeah, it's called a spade. And have a lovely night. Breakfast tomorrow will be at 8. And the meditation, such as it is, will be at 9. And you're welcome to join in those or not.